Right Meat presents Rapsidious by Joseph Gatz. Read by Pumpkin Patch 1234. Edited by Xufei Liu. Part 6. Francesca. Chapter 1. Katie Rollins sat on the couch of her small, one-bedroom apartment and watched the door. She was a chubby girl with dirty blonde hair and ivory skin. The TV was on and Adult Swim was broadcasting old episodes of Attack on Titan, but she wasn't watching. Katie was waiting for the fallout. When Katie's husband had left for work that morning, everything had been fine. They had eaten breakfast, joked about some popular internet meme, and he had kissed her on the way out the door. "Love you," he said automatically. "Love you too," she replied just as quickly, but she still liked to hear him say it. She also liked to say it because she loved him and she wanted to know that he loved her. And that's the way things had gone that morning. Katie cleaned up the apartment, curated her foodie Instagram account, and in general, just prepared for her husband's return. But something changed. When they spoke on the phone during his lunch, Katie had said or done something during the conversation that had pulled a dark cloud over their marriage. She had no idea what it had been, but it had caused him to go suddenly silent, and he ended the conversation quickly. Through the rest of the day, Katie had texted him a few times to no avail. She had waited for his phone call when he got off of work, which had been 2 hours before, but there had been none. So she waited for the inevitable, yet unpredictable outcome that always followed these detours in their happy marriage. He would come home, and she would have to walk on eggshells until he decided that it was over. Her stomach would be tight, and everything she did or said would be purposely crafted to not bother him in the slightest. If at best, she did nothing to upset him further, he might just completely ignore her, trap her in a box of absolute isolation and deny her affection or even communication. But if she tripped up and made him more upset, Katie's husband never hit her. He never so much as laid a hand on her. But there are other ways of abusing people. He slammed doors, he yelled, he had a way of nitpicking every little thing she did wrong until she felt utterly worthless. For Katie, possibly the worst part was that only she saw this side. It made her feel like she was going absolutely crazy. Their friends, family, coworkers, no one else knew but her. Their marriage wasn't all bad, though. Katie's husband could be the warmest, most considerate, most affectionate lover, friend, and soulmate that Katie had ever had. But then every so often, the snow globe of their lives flipped and the white flakes of despair rained over Katie until she was buried. Her husband was two sides of a coin, and Katie never knew what side she was talking to. There was never a hint of the warning signs until it was too late. So she waited. She waited for him to eventually walk through the door and let her know what kind of punishment she was in for. Would it be a week of isolation? A month? There was no way of telling. But Katie would play the role because there was nothing else that could be done. Nowhere else to go. When the knock came at the door, it was 4 a.m. Adult Swim had long gone off the air and Katie had switched over to the news. "I'm standing outside Centinela Hospital Medical Center in downtown Los Angeles," said the reporter, "where the scene is pure chaos. When I arrived here yesterday, it was just as the final building had fallen into the creature's mouth, and the chaos is still far from over." From the studio, the news anchor asked questions. "Are there any answers as to what the phenomenon was that tore a large hole open in the middle of the city?" "Right now, there are no answers. There are hundreds of people in the street just walking around in shock. Making matters worse, mass looting has erupted in the confusion of yesterday's disaster. Just a few blocks from here I can see rising smoke as the people have begun burning down local shops and businesses. The police are overwhelmed and are just telling people to go home. Troops from the National Guard have just begun." A second knock came to the door. Katie had just started to nod off when she finally heard it. Her husband must have lost his key yet again, she thought to herself. Katie stretched and yawned, then walked to the door in her pajama bottoms, a camisole, and a warm blanket draped over her shoulders. Her hazel eyes were too tired to look through the peephole, so she just opened the door, mentally preparing herself to see what kind of expression her husband would have on his face. Angry, sad, indifferent. The slightest clue might reveal how the rest of her night and the following day would go. But it wasn't Katie's husband standing in the apartment complex's hallway. It was two women in tight-fitting jumpsuits wearing simple white latex masks over their faces. The masks had holes for the nose and eyes, but none for the mouth, just an outline of their lips. One of two women carried with them a sack that she slowly began to open. "I'm sorry," said Katie. "Can I help you?" The two women looked at each other, then at Katie. The one with the sack in her hands quickly opened it and covered Katie's entire body in one smooth motion. Katie could feel the strength in the woman's arms as she easily closed the sack past her feet and began carrying her away. Katie began to scream, but there was something in the bag. A thick fog of chemicals. Before she could realize what was happening, everything started going black. The dim light from the hallway that could make it through the sack faded away until Katie was unconscious. Chapter 2. The California governor made a speech praising the quick, decisive decisions taken by first responders after the LA event. He asked for a moment of silence to honor the lives of those lost during and after the disaster, promising to activate additional National Guard troops to join those who were already maintaining a perimeter around the sinkhole and maintaining the rule of law in the area surrounding it. Then he opened up the press conference to questions. "This hole opened 3 days ago," said a man from the NBC affiliate. "I mean, what is it? What caused it? Do we have any answers at this point?" "You know, said the governor, we don't know. The perimeter is 100% contained as of this morning, thanks to help from the LAPD and the National Guard troops. We haven't been given the go-ahead by the CDC or the Army Corps of Engineers to send anyone else inside, since the last of the first responders came out with whatever survivors they could find, but, whatever it is, we do know that it's a big, dangerous hole in a place that wasn't designed for it, and we are taking every precaution to protect the citizens of Los Angeles." To the right of the governor, a staff sergeant of the National Guard whispered in the governor's ear, then spoke into the microphone. "My name is Sergeant Michael Palmer. I've been put in charge of security and logistics at Ground Zero. The men and women under my command are currently trying to move tens of thousands of people out of an area very rapidly. We have plans in place for mass evacuations, but this is a city of 4 million souls. No plan will ever work 100% when you're dealing with that much chaos. We want answers just like you about what this is that invaded the normalcy of our city. But our top priority right now is protecting those who are still alive and moving them away from the area until we know that the area is safe." Another reporter was called to ask a question and stood. "The evacuation means that all these people are effectively homeless now, correct? Where are they being taken?" The governor took control of the microphone back. "Any evacuees are being taken to secure quarantine facilities that have been established at local churches and fairgrounds. There is currently a tent village in Camp Pendleton where many of the family groups are going to help keep them together. I was at Camp Pendleton this morning, and there is an atmosphere of goodwill and cooperation there. People are pulling together. We have set up drives to collect donations of food and clothing which have started pouring in from all over the country. These people are being fed. They are getting proper medical attention. There are sanitary centers where they can shower and do laundry. But most importantly, there is security. Clearly, this is not a sustainable long-term solution, but for now, our people are being taken care of. We are Californians. We will survive, we will adapt, and we will prosper. And as far as answers, we will have them soon. No more questions at this time. Thank you." Chapter 3. Pawn. E2 to E4, said Lisa. Using just the power of her mind, Lisa Shepard made the white pawn on the chessboard between herself and Gretchen Peck move. "Pawn. E7 to E5, said Gretchen. Her own black pawn moved on its own as well. Close by, Ava Jordan practiced Ode to Joy on violin as she watched the bank of computer screens. Some were turned off, while others displayed empty rooms, and the rest showed the 9 prisoners that were being held by the Sisterhood of White Faces. The Sisterhood was a global organization with a singular guiding principle: finding the Ring of Rapsidious, and protecting the women of Earth from the alien race known as the Unbounded. Their West Coast base of operations was carved in a subterranean habitat below the Moor Woods. The entire base had been dug out and constructed solely by their immortal leader, Francesca Windwalker. In the computer display marked 29, Katie Rowland sat tied to a chair with electrodes attached to her face and chest. In the computer display marked 45, Juliana Gonzalez sat in a similar state. Ava watched them, remembering when she first came to the cave base. She had also been tied to a chair, and over the course of weeks she had been tortured. Their leader, Francesca, said that it was necessary. "Without pain, you will never know true freedom," said Francesca one night while standing in the shadows in the corner of Ava's cell. "And you've known pain for so long already. I promise you, I will not let that pain be taken for granted." At that time, Ava had a piece of duct tape covering her mouth, and she cried into it as a steady stream of electricity shocked her. "Night. G1 to F3, said Lisa. "Do you know where our fearless leader went?" "Night. B8 to C6, said Gretchen. "She took Audrey to the riots in LA for supplies. Costco, I think." Joy stumbled while playing the violin. She knew how to play, having done so most of her life at a skill level just beyond amateur. But Francesca told her not to use her finger when manipulating the instrument. She could use her bow, but to compress the strings needed to hit various chords. She was only permitted to use telekinesis. Francesca wanted her to fine-tune newly awakened mental powers to control the world around her through non-physical means. But Ava just wasn't getting it. She let the violin swing downwards in frustration. "I'm taking a break," said Ava. "This is impossible." Gretchen and Lisa looked at each other with wide eyes, then at Ava. "You better not let Francesca hear you talk like that," said Lisa, moving bishop F1 to C4. "Yeah, you gotta be careful about using the I word around here," said Gretchen. "The I word?" asked Ava. "What's that?" The two women just looked at each other and whispered in unison. "Impossible." "But this is crazy," said Ava. "I mean, don't you think this is crazy?" "We have gifts," said Gretchen. "We have to be trained on how to use them." "But why do we have gifts?" said Ava, completely giving up and putting down the violin. "Have you ever really thought about it? I mean, what were you doing before Francesca came and kidnapped you?" "She didn't kidnap us," said Lisa. "She liberated us." "Oh, come on," said Ava. "Let's just call it what it is. She picked my car while I was driving down the road and flew me out here. I didn't ask to come, and I definitely didn't ask for the torture. I mean, weren't both of you one of the girls on those monitors when you first got here?" "True," said Gretchen. "But can you really say she didn't make you better?" "I was working at a dead-end job with $100,000 in student loan debt," said Lisa. "My life was going nowhere. When Francesca found me, I was cutting myself regularly just to feel something other than anxiety." "I had cancer," said Gretchen. "Inoperative lung cancer. I was only 28 and the doctors gave me a year to live. That was 2 years ago." "What about you, Ava?" said Lisa. "What was going on in your life before Francesca took you?" "I mean, I guess." Ava sighed and looked away from the two girls. I I guess I was pretty messed up on Oxy," she said. "You see?" said Lisa. "Francesca saves. She saved you from drugs, she saved me from stress, and she saved Gretchen from literal death." "But the torture," said Ava. "I mean, we're watching these women be tortured as we speak. Don't you have a problem with that?" "You know what Francesca says about the torture," said Gretchen. "Pain is the fire that burns through the lies we tell ourselves. Only through pain can your true self be revealed." "But who is she to say who my true self is?" said Joy. "What if my true self was the one who was driving home that night?" Gretchen closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened her eyes, all the chess pieces started to float upwards. They spun around each other like synchronized swimmers, forming intricate patterns within their bodies. The spinning grew faster and faster until, without warning, all the pieces shot outwards at incredible speeds. But before any of them could hit a wall, computer monitor, or in the case of the Black Queen, Ava's face, they all stopped and just floated in midair. Cheater, said Lisa. A wide smile expanded on Gretchen's face, and she cackled as the pieces all fell to the ground. All of us have the power to do amazing things, yet none of us knew it until we met Francesca. How can you say you knew your true self before you came here? Chapter 4. The yellow Mustang spun around corners as it got further from the Las Vegas Strip. Inside, Nelson Sanford looked like he had just seen a ghost. But what he had seen wasn't a ghost. He had seen what the Navajo called Yi Na Di Shushi, a skinwalker. She had been stalking him through the MGM Grand as he went from blackjack table to blackjack table. As a ninth-generation child of Peter Clausen, Nelson was one of the few who had figured out what he was and had tapped into the power of the unbounded. He didn't know where that power came from or why he had it, but he knew how to use it. With the blink of an eye, he could access the great stream of knowledge, and he used this power to figure out what the dealer was holding. The skinwalker, who was known by the name Francesca, had sensed him and had started following him. When he first noticed her, he thought she might be casino security. Sometimes they got suspicious of his luck, and he had to make sure to dump a little bit extra back onto the table. But she didn't seem to look at his chips. She was looking directly into his eyes every chance she got. It got so uncomfortable that he went to leave. On his way up to his hotel room, she appeared again in the hallway to his room. She stood like Spectre with a long-bladed knife that had intricate patterns shaped into it, a white mask concealing her face. "We are all accountable for our sins, Mr. Sanford," she said, "and there are no exceptions made by God." He headed straight for the stairwell, and there she was again, 2 floors down and looking up at him as he descended. He quickly turned around and went out the first emergency exit he could find. By the time he made it to his car, he peeled out of his parking spot and nearly ran into her. She was standing directly behind his vehicle. To his luck, there was no one parking in front of him, and he pulled forward and through the parking garage. When he made it to the streets, a sea of sparks trailed behind his car as it bottomed out after running the street's gutter. He tore through the lights and glamour of the casino until he made it out of their glow, driving through the streets of Las Vegas, and finally felt calm when he was far enough away that the casinos were nowhere to be found. At a red light, he breathed a deep breath of relief and shook his head at the strange occurrence he just encountered. To his right, a black motorcycle pulled up, and the driver stared at him through their helmet's face mask. They started pointing and gesturing until finally they pulled their face mask away. "There's someone on your car, mate," said the cyclist before he peeled off at the green light. Nelson reluctantly put his head out the window to see if he could catch a glimpse of whatever the cyclist was talking about, unable to find anything by himself. He put his car in park and stepped out of the car. Again, nothing. The hairs on his neck were standing up, and he could feel that he was being watched. Slowly he got back into his car and put the Mustang into drive. Looking out his passenger side window, he saw the woman again. She was standing on the sidewalk, looking directly at him, but this time her eyes were a bright red behind her mask. "What are you?" he yelled. "What the hell are you?" She began running at the car, an unworldly scream coming from inside of her. Nelson didn't hesitate, putting his foot on the gas pedal and driving off, but by then, the light had gone back to red. An oncoming Ford F-150 driving a bit too fast shredded through the Mustang like it was made out of paper. Nelson, who hadn't put his seatbelt back on, spun with the car and was ejected out onto the street. His clothing was torn, his body was bloodied, but miraculously, he survived. The owner of the Ford put his emergencies on and stepped out of the truck. He slowly approached Nelson, who was already trying to stand. The truck driver was a young man, no older than 21. But to Nelson's eye, it was the woman with a white face slowly reaching for him. He ran. People at the scene of the accident looked on in shock. A passing Nevada highway patrol immediately threw his lights on and gave chase. He didn't have to go far. Nelson wasn't dead, but he was far from okay. He collapsed onto the street, and the patrol car, which had given chase, slowed and prepared to stop. But it didn't stop. Defying the will of its driver, the patrol car accelerated until it ran over Nelson Sanford. He died instantly. A crowd formed around the body. A few people took video, a few people snapped pictures. The police officer immediately called for an ambulance and backup. He was flustered by what had just happened, having never lost control of his cruiser that way. It was as if for a moment it had a will of its own. In the crowd, the woman who had previously worn a white mask now had her bare face exposed. Her right hand clutched the handle of the blade that was sheathed within her jeans. She looked different than she did at the casino. She looked different still than she did when she pulled Juliana Gonzalez out of the pit in Los Angeles days before. And more than likely, she would look different the next time someone noticed her. Chapter 5. In Los Angeles, no one had seen Francesca's face, but a lucky camera crew was able to get perfect footage of her first floating above the pit, then sinking into it. A loop of that footage played over and over in the office of Jacob Wilkerson's in the Langley, Virginia headquarters of the CIA. Jacob printed out a high-resolution screen grab of that image and looked at it for any clue he might be missing. After a few minutes, his cell phone went off and he put the picture down and answered it. "Wilkerson," he said. "Good morning, Mr. Wilkerson," said the voice on the other line. "This is Sean Chapman of the U.S. Terrorist Action Team. I'm sending a team into the Los Angeles hole today, and I'm told that you're being asked to join the team?" "That's right, Mr. Chapman. I can be in L.A. in 3 hours. When is your team going in?" "My team is ready to go in now. The only reason we're having this conversation is because I got a call last night from the Joint Chiefs of Staff asking me to give you all possible courtesy and consideration. So you want to tell me what this is all about?" "It's a matter of national security," said Wilkerson, looking at the picture of Francesca. He took the picture and carried it to a corkboard on his wall and pinned it beside other images of women who had been photographed remotely. He didn't know it yet, but all of them were variations of Francesca. "I'm on my way." Chapter 6. Bob and Peter carried their plates from island to island inside the nearly deserted Chinese buffet that was called King's Buffet, voted #1 in the OC. Various portraits of pandas decorated the walls, and a single waitress followed the two men around, nodding and smiling any time the two men looked at her. Peter found very little he wanted. The food looked old and unappetizing. Everything, even the bread, smelled slightly of seafood, even though there didn't seem to be any seafood on the menu, and the all-you-can-eat ribs had a single fly that was buzzing above them, occasionally stopping for a snack. Bob was thrilled and had asked Peter to carry a second plate for him while Bob took 2 plates himself. When they went to sit down, the waitress quickly brought over 2 glasses of water, 2 cups of hot tea, and per Bob's request, a can of orange soda. "Thank you," said Bob. "Will there be fresh ribs soon?" "Oh, yes. I'll have the cook prepare some now," said the waitress, surprised to hear her own dialect. "Are you finished?" asked Peter. "Yes," said Bob, already shoving a forkful of ribs into his mouth. The waitress ran off into the kitchen, where she slapped an annoyed cook with a towel as she yelled at him to put down the newspaper and cook some more ribs for their guests. Peter poked at his own food, sighed, and put down his fork. It all looked like food that had been delicious a week ago. "So what happens to your fingers?" he asked. "Does it grow back?" Bob savored the food in his mouth and chewed slowly, then washed it down with a drink of soda. "No," he said. "Once one of my golems has perished, it is gone forever." "Like forever, forever?" asked Peter. "Even when you go back?" "Yes," said Bob. "Even when I rejoin the Unbounded, part of me will always be missing. It is a sacrifice I make to instill my golem with the life force it needs to fulfill its function." "Well," said Peter, "what if the next one fails? And the one after that? Do you see where I'm going with this? No more golems, okay?" "All that matters is the ring," said Bob. "Once I regain my strength, even if we haven't located the ring, I will release a second golem." "Why in the hell would you do that? All this one did was get a bunch of people killed. No ring bearer and no ring." I didn't anticipate a force that could destroy my golem existing on this earth. I will not be so careless next time." "A force," said Peter. "You mean the first ring bearer. You mean Francesca." "Yes," said Bob. "She is very powerful, but I sense there are limits to what she can do. I didn't think she'd be getting involved here. When I first encountered her, she was just a frail little girl with coffee-colored skin, but over the centuries she learned to control her powers. If she had held the ring for much longer, she might have had the strength to keep it." "How did she lose it?" asked Bob. "Let's just say our sister didn't give her much choice." "Yet you did not recover the ring then?" asked Bob. "I did not. The ring's a real son of a gun, but by the time I realized she'd lost it, it was gone. And we've both been looking for it ever since," said Peter. "In fact, I'm sure that's why I haven't felt her hunting me lately. She's after bigger fish." By now, Bob had utterly emptied his 3 plates. He wiped away the excess sauces and creams from his lips and got up to get more. "Where are you going now?" asked Peter. "They just brought out fresh ribs," said Bob. "Do you want some?" "I don't think anything is fresh around here," said Peter. When Bob was gone, Peter pulled out his cell phone. On the unlocked screen, his wife and child smiled back at him. He smiled, found Laura in her contacts, and gave her a call. "Hi there," she said. "Hey, babe," said Peter. "How's it going?" "Fine now," she said. "Those guys you sent to replace the water cooler just left." "Is it working pretty well then?" asked Peter. "So far," said Laura. "No more gas smell?" he asked, looking over at Bob, who had collected his ribs and now was making a pyramid on a second plate made out of soggy-looking brandy-fried chicken. "Not at all," she said. "They installed the carbon monoxide detectors, too, so if there's another leak, it should text both of us." "Good, good," said Peter. "Look, something's come up and I'm going to be out of town for a few days." "All right," said Laura. "Is everything okay?" "Yeah," said Peter. "I just got a whale of an account and I need to babysit it for a few days." "Oh, well, Troy and I will miss you," she said. "Is he home from school yet?" "Not yet," she said. "You know how he is, always staying behind to hang out with his friends. I'm sure you were no different when you went to school." "Oh, you know it," he said as he watched Bob approach. "Okay, so I'll call again tonight to talk with Troy. Love you, babe." "Love you too," she said. Bob brought 2 heaping plates of food with him and immediately went to work on them. Peter watched with disgusted fascination at how efficient Bob had become at removing every bit of meat from the bones of the ribs he ate. "After this," said Peter, "we're going to drive out to the lab I told you about." "For what purpose?" asked Bob. "I really think we might be able to track down the ring there. I mean, unless you have any better ideas." "I don't think the ring is in this city," said Bob. "I feel that we should travel north." "I don't know what I feel," said Peter. "Sometimes I feel like the ring is north. Sometimes I get pulled east. All I know is that it would be nice to have a general idea of where this thing is exactly." "And your lab can do this?" asked Bob. "There's only one way to find out," said Peter. "If we don't do something, we're never going to find that ring." Chapter 7. In West Hollywood, from the garage of the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center employee parking lot, a green Jeep Wrangler pulled out onto Beverly Boulevard, turned left onto North Vermont, then left again onto Hollywood Boulevard. It then drove until it reached the 170 North and merged onto Highway 5. The driver, Tanika Moore, a nurse who had attended an impromptu meetup at a pizza place in downtown LA a few days before, had suddenly walked to her car in the middle of her shift and without telling anyone decided to make the 12-hour drive to the Cedars-Sinai laboratory at the UC Davis campus in Northern California. She drove without listening to the radio, without speaking one word to anyone, and without blinking a single time. And her eyes were pure black. Thanks again for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and like and share. And check us next week.